we've seen an increase in natural disasters around the world, and in many cases, their severity. And if we think about climate change issues, it's just simply that there's been an acceleration in terms of the visibility of changes to people in many areas of the world.
Dahil nga po sa location namin, daanan talaga ng bagyo dito po sa Pacific area. 20 bagyo dumadaan, yung tumatama talaga sa amin. Kailangan talaga laging handa kami, especially during from September hanggang February. Doon yung kalamitan pumapasok yung bagyo. Dahil nga sa climate change, kahit ngayong June, May, mayroong bagyo pa rin pumapasok.
But how many days will they stay in an evacuation center? Not days, weeks, sometimes months. I used to be an undersecretary of the SWP, and I was the one running this if there is calamity. Oh, we even have to shell out housing assistance. How much is one housing assistance at that time? 60,000, 30,000 pesos. Oh, if you have 100,000 evacuees, how do you deal with that? You multiply that. Take for example Yolanda. How much did we pay? We paid almost 500 million pesos. 500 million, 500 million. Not including the relief services na binigay namin doon. That's 500 million. How many lives have been taken? 585 clients and members there in Samar and Leyte. We pay them. Kasama yan dito yung the life insurance right there, and then we're paying, we pitch them because we want to be very true. We want to be true in our promise to them that we will pay them within a day.
Ang ikinabubuhay lang talaga ng Salcedo is dagat at saka pagtatanim. Karamihan ng Salcedo ay nabubuhay doon. Kung hindi wala yun, o kung mawawala yun, wala pong walang pagkakakitaan, walang source of income ang aming mga marginalized area. Kasi as far as Salcedo is concerned, ang threshold ng poverty namin more or less is nasa 60% pa eh.
We're seeing the emergence of different groups of countries which have had different historic trajectories, but also which have different current situations and future trajectories. And in some ways, one can think about that these groups of countries have divergent interests.
Although doon nangyayari ang emission, pero yung effect nandito sa amin sa mga mahihirap na lugar. And we believe on that standpoint na there must be contribution in the form of liability para naman makarespond kami sa mga climate change.
From the standpoint of finance, amongst our biggest discussions are how do we actually go about trying to get financial resources that do certain things. First, one really needs to provide resources that can be directed to the natural disasters wherever they occur. Second, one really needs to provide tools, and for me, much of this actually relates to systems around digital and financial inclusion that provide resilience and response to crises as they happen around the world. There is then another category that is about adaptation. In other words, how can countries get access to the resources that will enable them to adapt to this changing world? And finally, from the standpoint of finance, how can we actually go about getting the finance that we have to build better energy and transport systems, which will not only enable reduction from the standpoint of pollutants, but also from the standpoint of enabling development. And it becomes a very complex process to think about how can we actually take these disparate interests and the fact that the levels of urgency in some places are very different from the levels of urgency in others. And how can we go about crafting a system that tries to put in place resources to help those that are worst off, that tries to put in place resources to help support development, but a better, cleaner development that will have less negative impacts? And then how do we go about finding across international organizations, governments, and the private sector the financial resources to actually make this happen?